All right. So today we'll start our what I would consider the last unit of the course. This is on network flows. The very last class we will cover a new topic, but that won't be on the exams. So at the very end of the course we will cover a topic about intractability, about how we have been mostly focusing on problems for which we will give good algorithms, but there are many problems for which we don't know how to give good algorithms. So we will end the course with that. But this is the last main unit of this course, and it uses some ideas that we have gone through before, but it's a new paradigm. And in some sense, and there is a formal sense in which the network flow problem can be considered as one of the most, you can think of it as one of the most difficult problems that we know how to solve efficiently. So the problem itself, let me illustrate that using an example from the book. So so here is the situation. The problem itself the input is a directed graph with capacities on edges. Let's assume the capacities are integers, positive integers, and then we are given a designated source and a designated sink. These are the inputs. Okay, and the output is maximum flow from S okay. I'll explain to you in a minute. So let me take a picture from text. This is a directed graph. It has a bunch of different vertices. Okay, so we have 8 vertices here. So these numbers that I'm writing, they're all the capacities of these edges. Okay, so don't think of these numbers as distances. These numbers are capacities. And think of these capacities as, I guess, one analogy which is perfectly fine to use is think of this as the bandwidth you can send on so how many bits per second can you send? So maybe this is a link which is 15 megabits per second. Okay. Okay. So now, or you can think of these links as pipes. How much fluid can flow along these pipes over time? Think of this as an oil pipeline that carries oil. All of these links are pipes which have a certain capacity, so they can carry fluid at the rate of 10 units per second. Okay. Okay. So now the goal here in the problem is you're given this network, and so this is a directed graph. We call it as a network, and it has capacities, and there is a particular source, and there is a particular sink. And the goal is to figure out how much fluid, or how much bandwidth can I get by sending stuff out from S to T. Okay. Now don't think of it as a fixed amount of stuff that is going from S to T. Think of it as a continuous flow of fluid from S to T that's going to go on forever. Okay. So if you're sending some fluid along this link, then you cannot send more than 15 units per second. You can send any amount less than equal to 15%. Okay? So that's the problem. Now, it is the network flow problem is really it has tons of applications. We will devote a whole class, probably the class on Friday, to just applications of network flow. Because it's a very good exercise to figure out how you can translate other problems to network problems. Other problems may have nothing to do about flows. The other problems that we will look at, these applications, have nothing to do with flows. This will be about assigning tasks to servers of some kind, or image segmentation. None of these have anything to do with flows, but they can all be translated in the language of network flows. It's really powerful. So, in this class, we will try to understand two things. One is how to solve a network flow problem. Okay. But then we will cover most of it hopefully today. We will go through the definition, we will go through the definition of flows, we will go through a theorem that describes how to find flows, if there is a particular algorithm, and variants of this algorithm that will go over. That will be one part. But then we will spend a good portion of our time not even solving this problem, trying to see how other problems can be translated to these. Once you figure out how to translate some other problem to this problem, then you're just using this as a black box. You don't even need to know how it's solved. Okay? That idea is called reduction. You're trying to reduce one problem to another problem, and you're just using that as a module just as a black box and solve it. That's actually a good way to develop algorithms for more and more complex problems. Okay, so that's the setup. The latest, the problem set that was posted yesterday has two problems devoted to network flow. One trying to explore your understanding of the flows and cuts, and the other problem on again translating something which has nothing to do with flows at the outset into a network. I promised that we will try to have everything graded by today, but I think that's what we are still working on it. We will have the midterm and most of the stuff graded by Friday. We have quiz 3 almost finished graded, so you might get quiz 3 by the end of the class today. Otherwise, everything will be done on Friday. Okay, so that's the background for flows. So let's take a look at that example and try to see what we want of, what does it mean to define a flow from S to T. So you could send a flow of S to T, think of literally as fluid leaving S and arriving at T. The crucial thing that any flow has to satisfy, there are two properties. One is, so what is the flow? A flow F is a function that for every edge assigns a number, indicating how much fluid is going to be sent along that edge. It has to satisfy two properties. One is capacity constraint. You can never send along any edge E, you can never send more flow than the capacity for all edges. Okay? The second is conservation constraint. You can never collect stuff at any node, or you can never manufacture stuff at any node other than at the source, which only sends out, or the sink, which only consumes. Okay. So the conservation constraint basically says that if I look at all the edges going out of a vertex, so I look at all the edges going out of the vertex U, so I fix U and look at all the vertices V such that there is an edge going from U to V. That should be exactly equal to all the edges coming into U. For all U that is not the source of the sink. Is that statement clear? I'm adding over all edges going from U to V for all V. So I look at any vertex U. It has some edges coming in, some edges leaving. Okay? This is the sum of all the edges leaving. Amount of flow leaving U. That's what this is. The left hand side. This is sum of all the flows entering U. So what is it saying? The sum of the flows leaving U should be exactly equal to the sum of the flows entering U. There should be no collection of stuff anymore. Or you should not be creating new stuff anymore. Okay? But this is only true for S and for everything other than S and T. S, of course, is the source from which flow is leaving. T is the sink from which into which stuff is coming. Okay? Okay, good. So all right. So this is flow leaving. This is flow. Yes.
Could you show an application of that?
Yeah. We'll definitely go over an example. Yes. Okay. So let's come up with some amount of flow sending. So let me give you an example of a flow. So let's say we are imagining that we are sending fluid from us. We're going to push it out. Let's just come up with some way of doing it. We're not going to try to find the maximum, but just try to. So let's say I send 10 units of flow along this edge. Okay? So the way I'm going to write it is I'm going to add a new number and put that here. Okay? So 10 units of flow is going to go along this edge. Okay? So it's coming here. Now nothing can collect here. So that 10 units has to leave. Okay? Let's distribute it however. Let's come up with some way to distribute it. Let's say 2 units goes here, 6 units goes here, 2 units goes here. Okay? So I'm going to write here 2, 4, 6, 2. Okay? And then I'm here, and I will do 2 units here. Let's say I just send this all here. 10. This 6, let me do 3 on here, 3 here, this goes here, this here, 3, 10. Okay, so this 10 went here, 2 went here, 2 went here, 6 went here, now split into 3, 3, 3. So far so good, except that I still have to take care of this 2, right? So this 2, let me send along this one here. 2, and then let me add that here. Okay? Is that clear? So let's see whether this is a valid flow. For it to be a valid flow, for every intermediate, so all the capacity constraints should be satisfied. And they are satisfied because every number written on the left is smaller than the number written, not more than the number written on the right. There are no numbers written here, which just means that this is the flow of 0. So that capacity constraint is satisfied. The conservation constraint holds because if I look at every intermediate node, there's 10 units coming in, 2 plus 6 plus 2, 8, 10 leaving out. Let's look at this. 6 plus 2 coming in, 8, 5 plus 3 leaving out, 8. Okay, so for all intermediate points, everything coming in is there. Yes?
You wrote that 5 or 10, but isn't there coming in that position at different points of time?
No, there is no notion of time. It's a good question. There is no notion of time. Imagine that this is just happening forever. Okay, imagine that this is a pipeline. S is obliged to supply to T 10 units of gas forever, per second. So so 10 units are leaving here, every second 10 units are leaving here, every second 2 units are leaving there, 6 units are leaving there, 2 units are leaving there. Okay? So there's no notion of time. Even though we came up with these paths in sort of a sequential order, but the flow is just a flow that's going to happen forever. Think of it like that. Okay? Yes?
Can we have multiple sinks in one network?
Good question. Can we have multiple 6 in one network? The answer in general is yes. And if you have, there are variety of network flow problems. Some problems allow you multiple sinks, multiple sources, and and it depends upon the definition of the problem. Our definition of our problem right now just refers to one source and one sink. Okay? If you have multiple sinks and a single source, then in some sense it doesn't matter. You could connect all the sinks to just create a new sort of super sink and connect them together, and there will be the same problem. But if you have multiple sources, multiple sinks, and you care about which source is sending to which sink, so for example, you say, oh, this is a source that should only connect to that sink, this is a source that should only connect to that sink, that turns out to be a much more complicated problem. And if you have time, we'll talk about it in the very last class. Yes?
Just answer my question. I was going to ask, how do you break down multiple sinks into multiple sinks?
Yes. So if you have multiple sources, multiple sinks, so for example, you can imagine that would be an application where you want to set up paths between certain certain source points and certain destination points, and you need to find these different paths. They're all using the same bandwidth. How do you set up these paths? That turns out to be a much more complicated problem. Okay. For our purposes, we are just looking at we have just one source, one sink. We are just finding a flow. We don't care that these flows follow a particular path or not. We just want to send as much as we can from this source to the sink. We want to find as much amount of flow that we can send from this source. Okay? Yeah.
What is the aim of the problem? Where do we have to minimize?
No. This is the aim of the problem. Okay? I'll address that in a minute. Okay. So this is the flow, right? What is the value of the flow? The value of the flow is the amount of stuff you sent out from the source. Okay? Which is how much? 10. So the value of the flow sometimes you just write this notation. I think the text uses this notation. You will switch back and forth with these notations. How do you define the value of the flow? It is literally the amount of stuff that has left the source. So what do? You add up all the edges. Or let me just write it like this. Okay? All the edges going out of S, you add that together. But how much stuff is going into the sink? Exactly the same one. Why? Because there is nothing collected in between, nothing manufactured in between. So you could also define it if you wanted. Okay. So the goal of the problem is to send the maximum amount of flow that you could possibly get. Okay. So if we have produced one flow, is this the maximum flow?
Yeah.
Is this the largest possible we could send? Certainly, if you insist on only using this edge, it is the largest possible you can send, but there is a lot more stuff you could send, right? Okay. Let's try to build it and see the way to do it. So let's say we decide we're going to send 5 units here. So we send 5 units here. This 5 units, all of it can be sent along this now, because this was 2, now it can increase to 2. 7, and this can increase to 10. Good. So now we've increased the value of the flow from 10 to 15. Yes?
Will the maximum flow of this network always be less than or equal to all the edges leaving the sink capacity of those edges?
What do you think? Yes. Great. So that's key observation, which we will actually enshrine it in a more systematic way by capturing flows and cuts. Okay, so the point that was made was that you can never get, so look at the edges leaving the source S, which is 10 plus 5 plus 15. Okay, which is how much? 30. You can never get a flow which is more than 30. Right? Because the total amount of flow leaving the sink has to be less than equal to the capacity of this edges. Yes?
So in this case, the total capacity leaving the source and entering the sink is the same.
Well-
So that's where your upper bound is. But what if you have a different value leaving the source versus entering the sink?
That's true. So let's say the amount leaving the source is 30. Let's say the amount entering the sink is 25. So what is the better upper bound?
25.
25. You would say that, oh, no matter what you do, the total amount of flow that can leave the sink, leave the source, can be not more than 25.
So,
Yeah.
so that essentially the network flow problem is how to figure out the path that gets you to the maximum bound. Where
Yes, not just the path. Remember, we are now things are completely diffused, right? This 10 went like this, it split into two parts, then it split into, so it's not just a path. It's literally what we would say is a flow. It's just fluid flowing and finding its way through as long as all the capacities are met to the destination. Okay, so the network flow problem is to be able to keep pushing stuff in until you cannot push anymore, and you can prove that that's the maximum you can do. Okay? So good. So we know for sure that we cannot send more than 30, right? In this picture. Okay, let's try whether we can push our luck to up till 30. So let's try to send this. So let's try to send 15 on this. If you send 15 on this, you can go here. You can send all of 15 on here, but clearly you are stuck if you send all of 15 on here. That's because only 7 can go here, and only 6 can leave. So you cannot really send 15. And this 6, who knows what can happen with this 6, because this 6, only 1 can leave. So the other point we've observed is just looking at the source and the sink is not enough, right? Maybe there is a bottleneck somewhere in the middle. Good. So that is exactly where cuts come. So let's try to understand. Before we try to come up with a better flow for this. So let's look at so we're going to define this notion of ST cuts. Or sometimes we will just simply refer to it as a cut. A cut in the network is anything that separates S from T. Okay? The notion is very similar to what we used for minimum spanning trees, but there are fundamentally different structures here. Because firstly, notice that this is an electric graph. Okay? And there we didn't have a source or a sink. We were just looking at all kinds of cuts. Here we will be only talking about cuts that separate S from T. We won't be interested in cuts that separate anything else. Okay? So let's try to look at this situation. So let's define as S to T cut is sometimes you write it like this. So A on one side, B minus A on the other side. S belongs to A, T does not belong to A. That's a cut. Okay? So you have S, you have all the vertices here. So these are the vertices in A, and these are the vertices in. Okay. Can you give an example of a cut there?
S on one side, everything else on the other.
S on one side, everything else on the other. Or S on one side with 2, 3 on S, 2 and 3 on one side, T, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the other side. Okay. What about the following? S and 6 on one side, T, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 7 on the other side. Is that a valid cut? That is a valid cut. Any set is a valid cut. And in fact, it's very important, you should be thinking about cuts like that as well. Okay? A cut is simply S on one side, T on the other side, and some vertices on one side remaining on the other side. It doesn't matter if it looks sort of different from what the picture looks like. It doesn't matter because those cuts are also important. Okay, yes.
Are you saying any, like, if we took away any pipe, that's a cut?
No.
Okay.
You should take away pipes that separate A from V minus A.
Okay.
You have to look at all the pipes that separate A and V minus A. Okay? So we will go through an example and make it clear. So since I threw this example, S and 6, so let's say I put S and 6 on one side, and 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the other side. Let's say I did that. Okay, this is S. Okay. So what is the cut? Well, the cut refers to everything that is crossing between these 2 points. Okay. So what are the things going out of here to the other side? What are the edges going out of this side to the other side?
S to 2, S to 3, S
So
to
S to 2, S to 3, and S to 4. Then there is 6 to
6 to T.
6 to T and 6 to 7. Okay. So S to 2, S to 3, S to 4. Clear?
So 3, 6 and 3.
Well, no. I just, firstly, I'm just looking at everything that's going from this side to that side. Okay. All right. Good. So, so what is the capacity of each of these edges? Let's look at that. So S to 3 is 5. I'm just writing the capacities here. S to 3 is 5. S to 2 is 10. And S to 4 is 15. 6 to T is 10. And 6 to 7 is 15. Okay? So this would be what would be referred to as the capacity of that cut. Okay? And I think we'll sometimes just use A to refer to this cut, which is the side that includes little s. So we will say the capacity of the cut A is equal to, in this case it's 10 plus 10 plus, so 20, 30, 55. Okay. So if you wanted to separate this portion from this portion, you will have to remove all of these edges. If you remove all of these edges, there is nothing that can go from here to here. Okay? All right. Let's also look at the flows that are going along this. Okay? How much flow is going right now? From S to 4. S to 4 is nothing. From S to 2 you have 10. From S to 3 you have 5. From 6 to T you have 10. from 6 to 7 you have 3. Okay? So how much flow is going from this side to that side? Well, if you follow this, then it's 10 plus 10, 20 plus 5 plus 3, 28. But that's quite wrong, because the total amount of flow that is leaving S is 15. How can you have 28 amount of stuff flowing from this side to this side? Well, the reason is there is flow actually going backwards also along this cut, right? So in particular, if you look at, there are edges, as we mentioned, we didn't draw the edges that are going this way, which carry flow. So the capacity of the cut going from this side to this side is 55. The net flow after cut A, and we sometimes just use the term, so net flow across cut equals the flow of the edges that are going from A to B minus A. These are all the edges that are going from A to B minus A. But we're going to subtract the flow of the edges going from B minus A. Okay, this notation represents these are the edges that are going from A to B minus A. These are the edges that are going from B minus A. Okay? Good. So that's the net flow. Let's calculate the net flow. So the net flow is this direction. It is how much? 10 plus 10 plus 3 plus 5. We calculated it to be 20, 28. What about the reverse direction?
3 to 6, 2 to 6,
3 to 6. 3 to 6 is 7. 5 to 6 is 3 to 6 is 7. Is there anything else to 6?
2 to 6.
2 to 6. 2 to 6 is 6. Okay. Anything else that's going?
No.
Okay, so what do we get? Then 10 plus 10 is 20, 25, 28, minus 6, 24, so it's 20, 22, minus 7, 15. So what is the net flow across the cut? 15, which is the same as the value of the flow. Okay? So in fact, that's one of our main observations. The lemma, we can really prove it. I'm just going to write it down now. For any cut, net flow across the cut is equal to the value of the flow. Okay? Because literally there's just fluid that is going across, right? So if the amount of stuff leaving S is the value of the flow, then if you look at any cut, the net amount that is going from one side to the other side has to be equal to whatever was leaving S. It cannot collect anywhere, it cannot be created. Okay? Right? Okay, so that's one of the lemmas. The second lemma is given the claim, which you have sort of already hinted, that for any cut this is the second one is the most obvious. So for any cut A this is immediate. For any cut AB minus A, net flow across the cut is less than equal to the capacity of the cut. Remember, the capacity of the cut, you only look at stuff going from left to right. You don't subtract anything. The capacity of the cut is literally how much stuff can go across. And since the net flow across the cut is less than equal to the flow that could only be going from here to here, which is less than equal to the capacity of the cut, that is immediate.
Professor?
Yes.
Is capacity always left to right?
Always left, always the side containing S to the side containing T. Okay? So these two together imply what's called a weak duality lemma, which says that notice that this is true for any flow, right? For any cut this and any flow F. The weak duality lemma says that maximum flow value is less than equal to minimum cut capacity. One of the most interesting observations that we sort of intuitive, but comes out directly from whatever observations we have made. Remember, any flow value is, so you look at the value of the flow, that value of the flow is the net flow across every single cut, right? Because for any single cut, the net flow across the cut is the same as the value of the flow. So you give me a flow, that's the amount of flow that is the net flow across every single cut. But the net flow across every single cut is less than equal to the capacity of that cut. So look at the cut that has the least capacity. Okay? The net flow across that has to be less than equal to its capacity. So the maximum flow has to be less than equal to its capacity. So the maximum flow value has to be less than equal to the minimum capacity. This is the bottleneck we are talking about. Okay? And the fact that we could not push a flow of 30 meant that 30 was not the minimum capacity cut. There is some other cut that is out there that is preventing us from sending more than 30. Okay? We haven't yet reached that capacity, but there is a capacity. Okay? The most remarkable fact, actually, is that, as we will show in a moment, that it turns out that these two are exactly equal. That you can always send as much stuff as the capacity of the minimum cut. You can never send more than it, but you can always send as much as the capacity of the minimum cut. Yes?
So I understand why it's the minimum cut capacity, but what would, let's say, a maximum cut, what would that look like?
Maximum flow or minimum cut? Maximum
cut.
No, there is no maximum cut.
Wait, what is that?
Maximum flow value is less than equal to the minimum cut.
Right. What does, like.
What does minimum cut look like?
Maximum cut mean, is basically what I'm at.
Maximum cut capacity.
You mean,
Maximum cut capacity.
there is no maximum, this is minimum.
Right, no, I understand that, but like, if it were not, like, what would maximum cut capacity in this scenario? Is there such thing as maximum?
There is no such thing as maximum capacity. The maximum cut capacity, meaning you can define it, but it won't be useful because maximum cut capacity only tells you, oh, this cut has a lot of capacity. But that's useless if it turns out that there is some other cut that has very little capacity. Basically, the amount of flow you can send is constrained by the minimum cut, the bottleneck. Okay? And so basically what it's saying is that you can never send more flow than the capacity of the minimum cut. Okay? So you can, but we will show the following, and the max flow min cut theorem says that says that these two are exactly equal. That is max flow equals okay, and we will prove that. Yes.
I'm not sure why if flow can go from V minus A to why can't capacity go from from right now?
There is capacity. Certainly there is capacity. If you wanted, you could define the capacity of the cut as taking into account edges going from here to here and edges going from here to here. You could define it. But the point is that if you look at the flow that is, if you look at, okay, so let's try to prove this statement. Okay, and you'll see by this statement, the proof of that statement that basically, let me try to prove, let me write this down, lemma 1. Okay, let's try to prove lemma 2. So let's pick any cut. Let A B minus A be any cut. Okay. So let's pick. So what is the net flow across the cut? Well, the net flow across the cut is this quantity. So summation edges going out of A minus summation FE edges going into it. Okay? Now notice that this flow is always, you never have negative flow. You always, by our definition, you always have positive or zero flow. So this is less than equal to you agree? And this is some quantity minus something else is less than equal to the first quantity. A minus B is less than equal to A if B is non-negative. Now notice that by our capacity constraint, every F is less than equal to the capacity. So this is the flow going out of A is less than equal to the capacity. What is this? This is what we have defined as the capacity of the cut A. Okay? This is equal to capacity of cut A B minus B. So we have proved this lemma too. Okay? And now you could define capacity in a different way if you wanted, but then this claim would no longer be true. If you're going to subtract capacity from this side, okay, it won't be true. It will turn out that when you look at the minimum cut, and as you will shortly see, in the minimum cut, you will only be sending flow in this direction. You will never send a flow back. Because if you are sending a flow back as well, that means you are not using up all the capacity of the minimum. Yes?
Why do you structure the problem left to right? Why not start from the sink, because that's your ultimate constraint, and just reverse the direction of the edges?
So,
Why not move?
so your statement was that the sink is the ultimate constraint. It's not obvious. Why is the sink the ultimate constraint? In some sense, you could go left to right, you could go from sink to source, source to sink, it doesn't matter. It's completely symmetric. Because as you point out, you can reverse the edges and you can view as flow going from sink to source. It will be exactly the same thing.
Could you make the argument though that the sink will, if there's any bottlenecks going on in within the graph, can you argue that the sink will at least be the maximum
No.
bottleneck?
The bottleneck could be anywhere inside. Okay, I mean, literally, think of as you can view as fluid, sort of electrons going in one direction, or I don't know, positrons going in the other direction. It's exactly the same thing. There'll be however you want to view it's completely symmetric between source and sink. You just arbitrarily pick something to be source and something to be sink. If this was the source and this was the sink and the edges were reversed, that will be exactly the same problem. And the actual bottleneck could be anywhere inside the graph. I mean, in general. Of course, if your problem is such that you believe that most of the constraints are at the sink, then you could probably come up with other means. But here we are looking at the most general problem. We don't know where the bottlenecks are, so we are going to just figure out how to do it. In terms of our algorithm, we will be looking at ways to solve this problem. We won't necessarily think of this as, I'm starting from S and going to T. We won't necessarily think of like that. And we can go both ways. Whenever an algorithm is that's going that one way, you can think of an algorithm that's going the other way. That will also be. Okay, so we already proved lemma 2. Okay, lemma 1 can be proved similarly. I'm not going to do it. Weak duality directly follows from lemma 1 and lemma 2. We are going to prove the Max-Flow-Winkel theorem, but the way we will prove it is using an algorithm that we will develop. Okay? Okay. So let's come up with an algorithm to solve this problem. And the algorithm is like a greedy algorithm, but has interesting aspects to it. So to illustrate this algorithm, we're going to do an algorithm which is due to Ford and Fulkerson, which is actually not a specific algorithm, it's a class of algorithms. The idea of the algorithm is repeatedly what we try to do, send flow from S to T and keep adding flow to it. Okay? Except there is a little bit of an issue. What we were trying to do was, we were trying to do 10 and then we were splitting things around. So the algorithm is actually simpler than that. All it will try to do is find a path from S to T. Okay, so notice that it's completely symmetric. It's a path, I take the whole path going from S to T and I will try to send flow along that path. Okay, so high level is the following. This is not exactly correct, but you'll see. Okay, repeatedly find an ST augmenting path. Okay. All right. So to illustrate that, let me take an even simpler example. So let's say I have S here, T here. Let's say this is your graph, very simple network. Let's say capacity 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay? All right. So I'm going to just apply my greedy method that we were thinking of. So I'm going to find any path from S to T and try to send as much flow as I can. Okay? Find an ST augmenting path, send as much flow possible, and then I repeat until I cannot send anymore. That's the algorithm. Okay? So before we do anything, what's the maximum flow that we can send from S to T? 2 units. Okay. Think of it as 1 unit of flow here, 1 unit of flow here, 1 unit of flow here, 1 unit of flow here. Okay. So remember, the total flow value is always the flow leaving the source, or leaving the source, so you can send it. Good. Okay. So let me apply this algorithm. I said find me a path from S to T. Okay. So let's suppose I find this path. Okay. How much flow have you sent? 1. So I mark that. 1. Okay. Then I repeat. Then I come back here. Find me another flow path. Well, from S, this path, this edge is completely taken, so I cannot use that. So I'm left with this. I send a unit of flow here, but then I find that there is nothing I can do. Okay? So clearly this greedy algorithm, this sort of greedy-ish algorithm that we came up with, is flawed. It cannot find either maximum flow because we see for sure that you can send 2 units of flow. So here's the beauty of the Ford-Fulkerson algorithm. So they say that what we will do is we won't work with the same graph. Okay? We will always work with something called a residual network. The residual network is the same network, has exactly the same edges as before. Actually, no, it's not the same. There will be some changes made. And what we will do is, it will have different capacities. Okay? So the residual network has the following property, that if for every pair UV, okay, you will have an edge. So for every edge E in G, for every edge in the original graph G, you will have 2 edges in the residual network, one in the original direction and one in a reverse direction. Okay? So suppose flow is F, suppose the current flow is F, then we build the residual network GF. Has 2 edges, E and the reverse of E. Okay, let me just write down as reverse of E. What is the capacity of, so let me write down the capacity of this edge as CFE, which is the capacity in the residual network. The capacity of the edge E is whatever is remaining. Okay, how much flow, how much capacity the edge has, minus the flow that we have already committed to. But the reverse edge will have a capacity equal to the flow in the forward direction. Okay? This is basically saying that it allows you to correct any flow that you send. Okay? So you have sent 1 unit of flow. If you want, you can correct that by sending 1 unit of flow in the reverse direction, even if there was no edge before. Okay? So let's see that in this example. So we have sent a flow of 1 unit. So my current flow F is given here. This is my current flow F. This will be my residual network GF, corresponding to this. Okay? So I will have exactly the same, but for every edge, I will also have a reverse edge. Every edge that is carrying a flow I will also have a reverse edge. Okay? Every edge carrying a flow, I will have a reverse edge. This edge has a capacity of 1 here. Was there any flow sent on this? No. So this edge will still have its own capacity. Okay? This edge has a flow capacity of 1, flow of 1. So its capacity is 0. So you could actually remove it if you wanted. Its capacity is 0. Okay? This edge is the reverse of this edge, so it should basically have a capacity equal to the flow that is here. So flow of capacity of 1. Now this edge is actually going into S. You would never use an edge going into S for sending any flow. So if you wanted, you could also remove this. Okay, but I'm keeping it there. It doesn't matter. You could put a capacity of 1. You can keep it. It doesn't matter. Okay, let's follow this edge has a capacity of 1, flow of 1, we leave it there. This edge going from here to here has a capacity of 0, so you could remove it. This edge is going back, and so it will have a capacity of the flow which is equal to 1. Again, but this is an edge going out of the sink, you don't need to keep it. Okay, so far nothing interesting has happened. You could remove these two, without any issues. This is where the action is. This edge going this way, flow of 1, capacity of 1. So this edge will have a capacity of 0 because it cannot carry anything more. And again, you could not draw this. You could remove this. This edge is a new edge. It will have a capacity of 1. So this is your residual network. Okay. If you wanted more simple, sort of, I could, instead of writing this, I could draw the following graph, which is S, T. I'm removing all the 0 capacity edges and all the edges going into S and going out of T. So I would just have this, Instead of this, I could simply draw this and that would be fine. Okay. Again, what is the residual network? You take all the edges in the original graph. For every edge that is carrying a flow, you also add a reverse edge in the new graph. And for every edge in the original graph, its new capacity is its old capacity minus the flow. For the reverse edges, its capacity is equal to the flow on the reverse direction. So instead of finding a path in this graph, we are going to find a path in this graph. Okay? Is there a flow path in this graph?
Yeah.
That is. And that flow is this one. So we first send 1 unit of flow along this path. Then we send 1 unit of flow along this path. What happens? Okay, there is no edge in the original graph. There is no edge like this, but this edge, this flow, and this flow cancel out, and we basically get the 2 edges, the 2 paths that we knew existed in the first place. So when you take those 2 flows and put them on top of each other, you get your real flow.
But you have the center cycle.
No, the flow, notice that this edge doesn't exist. So the flow along this edge is equal to the flow of 1 minus this flow, which is a negative direction, which is equal to 0. So you don't have a central cycle because there is no cycle in the original graph. The graph doesn't even have an edge in this. So a flow in the reverse edge, which didn't exist, corresponds to reducing the flow on the forward edge, which does exist. Okay, we'll do it a little bit more carefully on this graph. Any questions? Yes.
How do you find the initial flow?
So the find any path. Start from any path in the original graph and build from there, and we will keep moving on. Okay? Any questions about? Yes.
Do you stop this until there's no path left?
Until there is nothing, you cannot find any. Until you cannot find any path from S to T, which means they are separated. Okay? So we will apply this to this graph in a moment. Any other questions? Okay. All right. So let me write down the algorithm fully. It's actually a very straightforward algorithm. So I'm going to write the same algorithm down, but just write it more carefully. So okay, so initially f is just empty. F of t equal to 0 or on. So initially there is no flow. Okay? So if there is no flow, then your network that you are working with is basically the original network. So GF is the same thing as G. Then you repeat. You find an augmenting path. By augmenting path, I simply mean a path of positive capacity. Find augmenting path P in which every edge has positive capacity. Every edge has capacity greater than 0, GF, from S to T. Once I have found a path, how much flow can I send along it? As much as the capacity of the lowest capacity edge along that path. Okay? So let Cp be capacity, or find Cp, which is the capacity of the minimum capacity edge. What do I do now? Along every edge along the path, I would increase the flow by equal to the Cp value. Okay. For all edge E in the path P, I set the flow of the edge E equals what its current flow is plus Cp. I increase the flow along that edge to be whatever its flow was before plus the capacity of it. Okay? Construct residual networks. Residual network GF, and the way we construct the residual network is you would have for every edge along this path we would have a reverse edge update, let us say update residual network. As follows. For all edge E in path, its capacity now Cf of E is equal to its original capacity minus how much flow is going. Okay, what is original capacity? Subtract the flow. And then finally for reverse edge, Cf of the reverse, let me write that. Cf of reverse of at E equals flow along the edge. So you keep repeating until S and T get disconnected. Repeat until S and T are disconnected in the residual network. So you cannot send any more flow. At that time you stop. Okay? So when you stop, you now have flows for all the edges. You also have flows for reverse of the edges, right? So what is the flow along an edge in the original graph? It's the flow in the forward direction minus the flow in the reverse direction, and that would be your final flow. Okay? Okay, so let's try to do that as an example here. Okay, so let's look at this graph. You have S here and T here. So let's draw the residual network for this, and then we will try to add an augmenting path, and we'll maybe do it a couple of more times. Okay, so from S we have this edge. So okay, so this edge is there as before. So let's put that in. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So let's suppose our flow here is F. This is what our current flow is, which is a flow value 15. Okay. So I'm going to draw the residual network GF. Okay. So this edge is there as before. 15 capacity. Let me draw all the edges that are there which don't carry any flow. So this is there as before, 4. This is there as before, 6. Every other edge is being used. Okay? So these are the edges that have not been used at all. S to 2. What should the capacity of S to 2 be? 0. So I'm not going to put it. But there's going to be a reverse edge from 2 to S, but I'm not going to put edges to S because there are no need for edges to S. S to 3. What's the capacity? 0. Reverse edge, not going to put it. 2 to 3. What's its capacity? 2. But there's a reverse edge whose capacity is 2. Okay, 1, 2 comes because of 4 minus 2. The other 2 comes because of the flow. Okay, 2 to 5 capacity 7. 5 to 2 capacity 2. Oh, 5 to 6 was already there. 15. 2 to 6 capacity 9. 6 to 2 capacity 6. 3 to 6 capacity 1. 6 to 3 capacity, 7. 6 to 7 has a capacity of 12. 7 to 6 is a capacity of 3. 7 to 10, 7 to T has a capacity of 7, and I'm not going to draw the edge back. 6 to T is capacity 0, and I'm not going to draw the edge back. 5 to T has a capacity of 0. So this is the residual network. It basically captures every addition I could do. Okay? And corrections I could make to the previous flow. So the algorithm now says find any path from S to T. It doesn't matter, any one path. So let's pick any path. Let's pick the path S to 4 to 7 to 3 to 2 to 5, sorry, 5 here's the path there. S to 4, S to 4 to 7 to 3 to 2 to 5. Okay. Notice by doing this, you are correcting some of the original flow. You are making changes to the original flow. Okay. So what is the capacity of this path?
Like 8.
15, 30, 6, 2, 7 and 8. So the answer is 2. The capacity of this path is 2. Okay. All right. So what happens? So we send 2 units of flow, 2 units of flow here, 2 units of flow here, 2 units of flow here. So if you want, we can just go ahead and update that directly on this. 2 units of flow here, 2 units of flow on this, 2 units of flow on this, 2 units of flow from here to here. What does that mean? 0 units of flow here. 2 units of flow from here to here. What does that mean? 4. 2 units of flow. Okay, what is the value of this flow now? What's the value of this flow? 17. We have increased it to 17. Okay? Let's make changes to our residual network. So S to 4, now it has become 13. So I'm going to leave it. 4 to 7 has now become 28. 7 to 3 has become 4. 3 to 2 has become 0, which is the same thing as this becoming 4. Right? That 8. So I'm going to remove that and just put 2 to 5 has become 2 to 5 has become 5, but the reverse direction has become 4. Alright, I have to fix some things actually.
Yeah.
2 to 5 has become 5, reverse direction has become. One thing I have to fix, right? This I don't need to change, but this I have to change. 4 to 7 is 28, 7 to 4 is 2. 7 to 3 is 4, 3 to 7 is 2. 6 this is okay. Okay. Finally, this one. 6. Okay. All right. Let's do one more shot. Is there another augmenting path from S to T? Yes. Okay, let's take the shortest we can think of. S to 4, 4 to 7, 7 to T. What's the capacity of that? 7. Okay, so let's fill that in. So this becomes, let me mark that for now. Okay. This becomes 2 plus 7, 9. 2 plus 7, 9. 3 plus 7, 10. Okay, in terms of my residual network, this is now 13 minus 7, 6. This is now 28 minus 7, 21. This increases to 9. And this becomes 7 minus 7, 0, so that's gone. I won't put a reverse edge because it's coming from T, it is not needed. Good. What's my total flow at this point? 10 plus 5, 15, 15 plus 9, 24. Okay. Is there a path from S to T? How does that go? So S to 4, 4 to 7, 7 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 2, 2 to 5, to T. Okay? Good. All right. How much flow can we send along this edge, along this path? 1. And which edge is that 1? 3 to 6. Okay, so let's go through this exercise. It's becoming a little crowded, but I think we will figure this out. So this goes from 6 to?
6 to 3.
6 to 5. Only 1 unit you're sending, because there is only 1 unit here. Okay. This edge from 21, its capacity goes down to 20, right? Because we're only sending 1 unit. And this 9 goes up to 10. This 7 to 3, was it 4 or 2? I forget now, I think 4. 7 to 3, from 4 its capacity goes down to 3. And 2 becomes 3. 3 to 6, 1 unit, we have filled up the 1 unit, so its capacity goes down to 0. So I can eliminate it. Instead, the 7 becomes 8. 6 to 2, capacity 6 goes down to 5, and this 9 goes up to 10. Five goes down to 4, this goes up to 5. 6 goes down to. Okay, let's update here. The path was from S to 4, so this became 10. 4 to 7 became 10. 7 to 3 became 3. The next one was 3 to 6, right? 3 to 6 became 8. 6 to 2, so this became 5. 2 2 to 5, became 5, 5 to T. Good. What's the capacity, what's the total value of that flow right now? 25. Is it a path from S to T?
Yeah.
Okay. What's the path? S to 4, 4 to 7, 7 to 6,
2,
6 to 2,
5.
2 to 5. Okay. So S to 4, 4 to 7, 7 to 6, 6 to 2, 2 to 5. T. Okay, what's the capacity of that path? 3. Okay, so let's see the outcome of that. So you'll increase this to, let's do it slowly. So 5, this becomes 2. This 20 becomes 17, 10 becomes 13. This 3 vanishes, 12 becomes 15. This 5 becomes 2, 10 becomes 13. 4 becomes 1, 5 becomes 8. This 5 becomes 2. Okay, update here. 10 becomes 13, 13, and then from 7 it went to 6, right? 7 to 6.
0.
So that becomes 0. Then from 6 to
2.
2. So that becomes 2. From 2 to 5 becomes 8. Okay? All right. Any more paths from S to T? No. In the residual network. So what do we do now? So let's try to find out why there are no more paths from S to T. S can go to 4, correct? Can S go to 7?
Yeah.
Can S go to 3?
Yeah.
Can S go to 6?
No.
Can S go to 2? Can S go to 5? So this is our minimum cut in the original graph. Let's examine the original graph. S 3, 4, 7. Okay? What are the edges going from the S side to the T side? You have this edge, capacity 10. This edge capacity 8. This edge capacity 10. Nothing else. So how much is the capacity of this cut?
28.
28. What's the value of our flow? So it's impossible for us to do any better. We cannot do any better. Okay? Why is that? Because we know that maximum flow is less than equal to 0. So that's the beauty of this algorithm. This will not only give you the actual flow, it will also tell you where the minimum cut is. Okay? Okay, so we won't have time to go over the proof of the max flow Windcut theorem, but is the whole process clear? Okay, so the algorithm is just literally this. You repeatedly run, you start with your original graph, find any flow, find any path. On that path, always send the maximum amount you can possibly send. Once you send the maximum amount you can possibly send, you can construct a residual network, and you find your flow in the augmenting path in the residual network, and keep repeating this. When you find a path in the residual network, you update your flow, you update the capacities of the residual network, you just do that. Okay? So let's try to, before we end, let's try to understand how fast will this algorithm take. What is the running time of this algorithm? The problem that happens is, notice that edges, we remove some edges, right? But then the edges could reappear. So edges keep leaving and reappearing, keep leaving and reappearing. And indeed, this algorithm, even though it's so nice and beautiful, could actually take a very, very, very long time. Okay? Let's go back to our example that we did. S T Okay, let's look at this example. How many edges are there in this graph? What is the value of the maximum flow? 2 million. Okay? Let's run our Ford Fulkerson algorithm on this. It will be here for a long time. I guarantee you. So it doesn't say anything, it just says find the path. Okay? If we pick this path, it's beautiful. We have sent a million units of flow, one step, a million units of flow, the second step, you're done. But let's suppose, it doesn't say which path to choose. Let's suppose I choose this path. How much flow do we send on this? One. What does the residual network look like? Okay, this million is there. This 9999. Okay, but this edge is now in this direction. Is 3. Now this is the residual network. And you could find a flow. You could keep going. So the worst case run, the only thing you can be sure about the augmenting path algorithm for Fulkerson, that in every round it will send at least 1 unit of flow. So its running time cannot be more than the value of the flow in the number of iterations. So that you can guarantee. But you can make it as bad as that. Okay? So the number of iterations surely is less than equal to the value of the maximum flow. But it could take as much as the value of the maximum flow, which could be much, much, much bigger than the size of the graph. Because this million was just a number, right? It could be anything. So what do we do? So there are algorithms, we won't cover those algorithms. There are algorithms that tell you which paths to choose. And it turns out that one very simple rule is find the shortest possible path. Find the shortest possible path, send on that flow. That turns out to take time independent of the value of the flow, but only dependent on the size of the graph. Again, that I think you can show that the running time of that algorithm, that's called Edmonds-Carr. That takes big O of, I think, VE squared or something like that. There are much faster algorithms out there, but suffice it to say that we can solve the problem in polynomial time, which is enough. We won't be worried about the exact running time, we just will argue that we can solve it in polynomial time. Okay? Alright, we will stop here and we will resume with applications next class.